your mobile device and navigate to minty.com and use the access code on the screen, which is 945920, and share some information about yourself. You can share your name, role, and what you hope to learn today. Much everyone who's been participating in our Minty activity. If you have just joined and you didn't hear the introduction for this, if you could either use a new browser tab or your mobile device to navigate to minty.com and use the code provided on the screen and share some information about yourself. You can share your name, role, and what you hope to learn today. And thank you as well to those using the chat to share some information.
The code is up at the top of the screen. It starts with 94.
Well, thanks everyone. Now that we've had a chance to introduce ourselves a little bit, I'm going to introduce our presenters. My name is Leah, and I'm one of the communications coordinators with the Oregon Science Teachers Association, and I'm really excited to welcome a team from ODE. We have a whole team here presenting to you. The first person I will introduce is Jamie Rummage, who is the science specialist at ODE. Welcome, Jamie.
Great, thank you. Actually, we're going to turn it over and hear from Noelle first.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining. My name is Noelle Gorbett, and we would like to open today with a land acknowledgement. For those of you who may be unfamiliar, land acknowledgements are an expression of gratitude and appreciation to those whose territory we all reside on. It is a way of honoring the indigenous people who have been and are currently living and working on this land since time immemorial. It is also a call to action in the work we do in service of education and students. It lays the foundation to decentralize white narratives and redistributes power and privilege. So with that background, we would like to acknowledge the many tribes and bands who call Oregon their ancestral territory. We would like to honor the ongoing relationship between the land, plants, animals, and people indigenous to this place we now call Oregon. We recognize the continued sovereignty of the 9 federally recognized tribes who have ties to this place and thank them for continuing to teach us how we might all be here together. Thank you. Now I will pass this over to Jamie.
Great. Thank you, Noelle, for that grounding. So hello and welcome. It's great to see everyone on the screen, at least this afternoon. I really appreciate everyone joining us today. My name is Jamie Rummage, and I serve as the Science Education Specialist at the Oregon Department of Education. And as we start this presentation today, I just want to name something we are all very aware of, that we're living through some unprecedented times that are filled with incredible challenges, amazing opportunities, and undeniable responsibilities. And so I really do truly appreciate you joining us here today. Time is something we can never get back, so really appreciate your time with us today. So for those of you who have joined a session with me before, we typically start with some working agreements, but due to just the platform and our limited time together this afternoon, we're going to go ahead and head into today's session, just agreeing that we're all showing up as the best versions of ourselves in this particular moment, and we'll call on each other to action in the service that we do in education and for our students. So with that, here is our equity stance that grounds the work of the Oregon Department of Education and therefore the work of the Oregon Open Learning Hub. And just to ensure we're all on the same understanding, I'm going to go ahead and read the following slide to you, but I promise I will not be reading every slide to you for the next hour. So here we go. So educational equity is the equitable implementation of policy, practices, procedures, and legislation that translates into resource allocation, education rigor, and opportunities for historically and currently marginalized youth, students, and families, including civil rights protected classes. This means the restructuring and dismantling of systems and institutions that create the dichotomy of beneficiaries and the oppressed and marginalized. So just to spend a few minutes, I would like to take the time to briefly introduce some of the talented colleagues I have the opportunity and privilege of working with. So Deb Bailey, who is joining us today, is the STEM education specialist. Noelle Gorbett, who we just heard from, is the science assessment specialist. And we're also joined by folks from the Oregon Open Learning team. So on the slide here, there are some people who are not with us today, but those who are able to join us today is Vanessa Clark, Renee House, and Susan Payne. And so feel free to reach out to any of us if you have any questions after today. And I just want to let you know that back in March, the Oregon Open Learning team was originally tasked with some initial supports for districts. And since that time, we have connected with our internal colleagues, external educational partners, and had our official launch of the hub back in May, which seems like a very long time ago, but really was not that long ago. And we continue to listen to district leaders and educators to really champion a new way of engaging with educational resources and to create an inclusive space where collaboration is key. So we want you to know that you are not alone in this journey as you dive into the hub. And again, feel free to reach out. You can connect with us via the email that's on the slide and also sign up for a mailing list that is specific to Oregon Open Learning. And I think Renee will probably be posting those into the chat. So the vision and the guiding principles that were set forth last spring when we initially transitioned into distance learning remain the same today, with the focus on ensuring the health and well-being of students, educators, and our communities at large. And as we continue to navigate through this global pandemic and unprecedented times in education, the emphasis still continues to be care, connection, and continuity. And we'll do that by ensuring safety and wellness, connection and relationships, centering on equity, and innovation, which requires ongoing reflection and iteration to assure deep learning for every community and student. And so as we recognize the disproportionate impacts that COVID-19 has on our Black, American Indian, Alaska Native, Latinx, Pacific Islander communities, students experiencing disabilities, and students and families navigating poverty. So the Oregon Open Learning Hub really plays a key role in promoting each one of these guiding principles. And so with that foundational understanding, I'm going to hand it back over to Noelle, and she'll talk about some of the learning outcomes that we hope everyone has today.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you, Jamie. We have 4 intended learning outcomes today. I can explain the why and what of the Oregon Open Learning Hub. I can navigate and search for resources within the OER Commons and Oregon Open Learning. I can recognize open licensing. I can add resources to a group using the authoring tools of the Hub. Some of you are joining us for the first time, and some of you have joined us before. So I'm going to have Susan take us through another Mentimeter engagement.
Yeah, so we wanted to just get started with a kind of a formative assessment activity to address this first learning objective, which is I can explain the why and the what of the Oregon Open Learning Hub. And as Noelle just mentioned, it sounds like some of you have joined us before, so you may know the answers, so you have a little advantage in our little quiz competition here. But if you haven't joined us before, obviously just take your best guess. This is really just a fun way to kind of present some of the basics. There's just 4 questions. Each of the questions is worth 1,000 points. And if you haven't already, you can still join Menti by just going to menti.com and putting that code in that you can see at the top of the slide. You can also, I think some of you may have already put your real name in over, but Mentimeter will provide you with kind of like a silly name. So we'll just see, we might not know who the actual winner is, but it'll be fun anyway. Okay, so let's get started. Looks like we have most folks in there. And like I said, you can still join while it's in process. So this is the first question. What is Oregon Open Learning? So you have 3 choices. Is it a digital resource repository, a space for educator collaboration, a movement to promote sharing free and open educational resources, or all of those? Okay, so 20 of you got the right answer. Doesn't mean that the rest of you are wrong, because all of the answers were right technically. So yes, Oregon Open Learning is all of those things. Our next question is, we're waiting. What does OER stand for? So here I think we have 4 choices. Oregon Education Resources, Open Education Resources, Open Education Repository, or Oregon Educators Rock. Can see a few of you smiling at that last one. I know you want to choose that one. And that is a good answer, but the correct answer is Open Education Resources. And I think sometimes, being that we're from Oregon, sometimes we get excited about the O being Oregon, but the open education movement is actually a national movement. So that's a good way to remember that it's actually Open Education Resources. Okay, question 3. Which of the following is not one of the 5 R's of OER? So these are like all the things that you can do with an OER. So we have 6 choices here: reuse, remix, recycle, redistribute, revise, and retain. So pick the one that you think is not one of the 5 R's. All right, so 6 folks got that one right. So recycle is not one of the 5 R's, and a little bit later, I can't remember who, I think it's Deb, is going to tell us more about those 5 R's. And our last question is slower than usual, what are the Oregon Open Learning touchstones? So again, we have 3 choices here. Are they equity, engagement, and empowerment, equity, empowerment, and efficacy, or equity, engagement, and effectiveness? Yeah, that first choice is always a popular one. The actual answer is number 2, equity, empowerment, and efficacy. And we're going to transition now and tell you a little bit about each of those 3 touchstones, because really together those are what make up the why behind Oregon Open Learning. But first, we want to see who our big winner is. It looks like Bender got all of the questions right. Nice work, Bender. If you want, I don't know if that's your real name or if that was meant to be your name, but you can tell us who you are in the chat so we can give you props.
It looked like it was Leah. Leah shared that it was her in the chat. Congratulations, Leah.
Now you have a new nickname. All right, so we'll talk a little bit about each of the touchstones. I'm going to start with equity. So the COVID-19 pandemic, as you all are aware, has really underscored the tremendous inequities and various levels of access to learning resources that exist across Oregon and the nation. So while this event has created significant disequilibrium in our educational systems, we now really have a responsibility and an opportunity to rethink and rebuild our collective approach to instructional materials and educational resources. The Oregon Open Learning Hub and Open Education Resources enable a shift in the power structures that have historically driven the development of educational materials. And they do that by broadening access to authorship and supporting the inclusion of historically marginalized voices.
I have empowerment. In addition, OER empowers educators to make changes to materials and to improve upon them by adapting them to the local context, adding scaffolding to better support their students' needs, or even to add graphics and other creative works. This empowerment also means that educators are encouraged to share the revisions they've made with other educators who can benefit from their work, both locally and across the state.
And finally, an investment in OER is an investment in building the capacity of the people in our education community and develop their sense of efficacy. When we support the creation of high quality resources by and for Oregon educators, all students can benefit from the collective expertise of dedicated educators who are learning from each other, working collaboratively, and sharing their best ideas. As a result, we elevate the teaching profession and improve our ability to meet the needs of all learners by providing access to resources that are relevant, up to date, and openly shareable.
Open educational resources are really teaching, learning, and research resources that reside in the public domain or that have been released under an intellectual property license that permits their free use and repurposing by others. Open educational resources can include full courses, course materials, modules, textbooks, streaming videos, tests, software, and any other tools, materials, or techniques used to support access to knowledge. When working with OER, we want to keep in mind the 5 R's. The first is retain. This means you make and own copies of the original OER. The next is reuse, which means you can use the OER in a variety of ways. The third R is revise. This means you can adapt, modify, and even improve upon the original OER. Then there's remix, which means you can combine 2 or more resources. And finally, the 5th R is redistribute, which allows you to share your OER creation with others. The image you see on this slide tells the story of the process that a young student named Austin went through in creating a drawing of a butterfly. We can apply the same idea when thinking about how developing and curating open educational resources invites educators not only to share resources, but also to revise and remix them as part of an ongoing iterative process. So, the next slide, we want to illustrate the potential of OER. So let's consider the journey of an open resource across Oregon. As we follow the action, pay attention to the number of educators and students reached, as well as the number of revisions made to the original resource. Each iteration improves the quality and accessibility of the resource. So here we go.
A middle school science educator in Grants Pass contributes a hands-on activity she created to the science group in the Oregon Open Learning. This educator serves 125 students.
From there, a dual language science educator in Hillsborough finds the resource and translates it into Spanish for students. The remixed resource is shared back to the science group. Now, in its second iteration, the resource has reached 2 educators and around 170 students.
Next, an educator in Hermiston is looking for science activities in Spanish and finds the remix on Oregon Open Learning. He shares it with his PLC and they add an SEL component to the opening of the lesson. The third revision has been used by 5 educators now and reached over 320 students.
The Hermiston team has connected with a team of educators from Redmond through the Oregon Science Project. They send a link to the resource, which is used throughout one of the middle schools. Even though it wasn't revised or remixed, it is widely used in the region. We're up to 8 educators and around 500 students.
The same dual language educator in Hillsborough connected with a group of educators working with the Portland Metro STEM Partnership, and they decided to add a math component to help the activity serve even more students. The new resource gets added back to the hub in both the science and math groups. Afterwards, they shared the resource through their region, and a few educators decided to use it. This single revision nearly doubled the number of educators reached and nearly tripled the number of students.
Lane ESD and Eugene 4J are collaborating on some interdisciplinary units. They find the STEM resource fits right into one of their PBL units. The resource is remixed into this unit and the full unit is added to the project-based learning group on the hub. Several Lane County educators use the full unit. Now in its 5th iteration, the number of educators reached nearly doubles again, and the total number of students reached sits around 2,200 students.
Meanwhile, the Special Education Program Administrator at South Coast ESD promotes the hub throughout her region, and a middle school educator in Central Curry School District finds the resource and adds some differentiation for one of his students experiencing a disability. This remix is shared back with the hub. You get the idea. In all, nearly 40 educators used the initial activity and it reached over 3,000 students. The quality of the resource improved each time, as each educator or team added more components based on their students' needs. It is also worth noting that there were 0 copyright violations involved because each of the resources was openly licensed. And perhaps the best news, there was no cost to use the resource other than teacher time and perhaps making a few copies as needed.
So I think now we are going to take a look at navigating and searching for resources within an OER Commons on the Oregon Open Learning Hub. And so Vanessa is going to give us a virtual tour of this. And I know that there are some questions coming up in the chat, and keep those coming. We will address them kind of towards the end. But as things come up, feel free to utilize that.
Yeah, so the Oregon Open Learning Hub is a site within OER Commons. And OER Commons is a digital public library that hosts over 50,000 digital resources. We're here on the OER Commons homepage right now. And if you want to search the entire OER Commons, you can use the search functions here. If you'd like to go to the hub, you would go to the Hubs menu and then click See All Hubs. And this page will list all of the hubs on OER Commons in alphabetical order. So you can scroll down until you find Oregon Open Learning. And you can also check out some of the other organizations and states that host their OER initiatives here as well. On Oregon Open Learning, this is the space that really is just for Oregon, designed for Oregon educators and students and communities. Here on our homepage, there's a search bar that allows you to search just within Oregon's hub. There are also menu options here to allow you to jump to a specific section of the hub, or you can just scroll down. As you scroll down, you'll see our About section, which tells a little more about the hub, any announcements that we have, the curricular resources section. These are all collections of nationally known content providers. So these are resources that you can get started using right away. And then right past that, you'll see our groups section. And the groups section is really the collaborative workspace. And I'm going to point out a couple of groups to you. We have our Oregon OER Professional Learning Group. This is where you'll want to go to get started learning about OER and about using the Oregon Open Learning Hub and OER Commons. And then I'll also point out our Oregon Science Group, which obviously being interested in this webinar, probably many of you are interested in science. Once you go into a group, this green button right here, if you are not a member of the group yet, it will say join. So anyone can create an account on OER Commons, and you'll see my little tiny photo up here in the corner. If that doesn't have a photo or a little image of a person, you can click that to create your account. And then once you're logged into OER Commons, you can always click that join button, and that will make sure that you get an email with announcements that go out on the hub. And I'm going to turn this back over to Jamie so that she can tell a little more about the difference between groups and collections.
Great. Thank you, Vanessa. Let me just get to my screen. So one of the things I just want to call out as well is you don't necessarily need to have an account in order to access any of the resources on the OER Commons in general, or even on the Oregon Open Learning Hub. So I know that may be one of the questions that have come up in the past. And so you can join if you are interested in adding things to the group, which we would encourage you to do, but you can also access it from that. One of the things that you'll want to spend some time doing is taking a look at the hubs, and there are quite a few different groups. So I know a lot of us are not necessarily just interested in science, you know, especially if you are elementary educators, there are quite a few different groups to go through and take a look at. So you're going to want to spend some time there. But I just briefly want to go over the difference between the functions of a group and the functionality of a collection. So in the Oregon Open Learning Hub and on the slide in front of you, you'll notice that groups are indicated by a circular icon button and collections are indicated by a rectangular icon button. And groups are the working spaces where people are actively collaborating to curate, remix, and adapt resources. And once that resource is ready to be broadly shared, it moves into a collection where the instructional content is deemed of the highest possible quality. It's tagged with appropriate standards and then becomes searchable within the Oregon Open Learning Hub. Currently, we do not yet have Oregon-specific collections, but that is the direction we're moving to. So I'm going to hand it over to Susan just to give us some parameters around how we might spend the next few minutes exploring the Oregon Open Learning Hub.
Yeah, so if you haven't already gotten onto the hub, this is the spot where we're going to encourage you to go ahead and do that and do some exploring. We have a few things like a little fun scavenger hunt if you want to hit all these bullet points. So you might want to look for a resource or group to support your area of expertise or a curiosity. You've kind of already seen the science group, so you might just check out what else is there. I would suggest, if you're interested, that you join the science group. So as Vanessa said, that you can then get those email announcements and participate in the discussions in that group. You might find a picture of a bridge on the hub and then check out that professional learning group and see if you can find the user guide in there. So I'm going to set my timer for about 4 minutes, and you can head out there, look around. If questions come up while you are exploring, feel free to put them in the chat. You can also unmute and ask us. And then when we come back together, we'll ask for a few volunteers to share something that they found. All right, have fun.
So Dan, I'll go ahead and address your question. So the question that came through on the chat is just what's the difference between Oregon Teaching and Learning and Oregon Educational Partners and Practices, and why are they separated? So one of the things that we have spent a lot of time sort of researching and talking with other states on sort of the best setup and what is not only visually appealing, but what sort of makes sense to right size each screen. And so the determination on that is the Oregon Teaching and Learning are areas that have standards or is a particular office within the Oregon Department of Education. And so that is that separation of Oregon Teaching and Learning. And then educational partners, if you take a look, you have the regional STEM hubs, you have the alternative education educators group and a few different groups that support education. Thank you for putting that up on the slide. And so those tabs just go between that piece. So we wanted to kind of separate out some of the content pieces and some of the areas where there may be grants associated with them or particular groups that come together. No, thanks for the question. So feel free to put anything in the chat if you have questions now or as they come up. Maybe just as a follow-up to that explanation as well, if for some reason there is a group that you think would have great interest that isn't already represented on the Oregon Open Learning Hub, feel free to reach out at the Oregon Open Learning at state.or.us, and we'd be happy to explore and figure out what that group could or should look like. One of the things that we are always sort of cognizant of is we don't want to build something out if no one's going to actually have the capacity to actually build out a particular group. So the Oregon Science Group, so if you, let's see, it looks like Carrie's looking for the particular group. We can definitely put the direct link in there. So, and somebody, let's see, So we'll put the Oregon Science Leaders or the Oregon Science Group. Vanessa, are you able to capture that? Perfect. Thank you, Renee. And then let's see, the other one in the list, let's try to go through all these questions that are coming in. Where did it go? And so I don't know if you actually receive an email that you've joined the group. I thought you automatically, what should probably change on your platform if you've set up an account and then you've clicked join the group. I do believe you receive an email, but one of the things you'll also notice, it'll go from join to contribute to the group. So if that hasn't happened, we can definitely take a look, Carrie. And then Outdoor School does have a group. If you go to the educational partners, we just presented to that particular group last week. And so Outdoor School has a group under educational partners. Made my screen too small here.
So yeah, I'm seeing a lot of great questions in the chat. One of them from Kara, which was how do I save the Oregon Open Learning user guide to my Google Drive for reading later. So that is it is a Google Doc, but I think the best thing would be to probably just bookmark it, because if you were to make a copy, then I don't know that we're going to be updating it within the next, like if you were going to read it within the next week, it's probably not going to change. So you could also just make a copy of it and add it to your drive. Am I forgetting something, Vanessa? No? Okay. So that's a great question. Makes me very excited that you're going to explore the user guide. There's a lot of great resources in there. Did you already talk about the STEM partnerships, Jamie?
I did not, no.
So those are on the partnerships tab. It's actually not specific to the Portland Metro, but it's all regional STEM partnerships. There's a group for those. And Beth wanted to know how long this resource has been available. April?
So the Oregon, yeah, I was trying to think, the Oregon Open Learning Hub, we just stood it up within the last 5 months. So this team came together and built it out. OER Commons, I'm gonna have to defer to Vanessa. So Vanessa's been championing this since she got to the department, what, 6 years ago or something like that. So I'm not sure how long OER Commons platform has been around. So Vanessa, do you have some?
I don't know exactly how long, but it was either developed just after USED's U.S. Department of Education's Go Open initiative was launched. So that was launched in 2015. So it's possible that it was right after that, but it may have even been around a little bit before that. OER as a concept has been around really since the mid 2000s. So like somewhere around 2005, 2006 is when people really started thinking about open educational resources and how to really share knowledge equitably in that way.
And I know it looks like some of you may be waiting for an instant email. I'm not sure the time frame and how long it takes to get an email back. So I will have to get back on you. I do know that I get an alert every time somebody joins the group. So I will let you know at the end of this presentation if I have any updated information to share about that piece.
Yeah, so one other question from Beth. Can we easily link the OER lessons to Seesaw? So some of you may have seen that that there is an easy way to import resources into Google Classroom. There's actually a little icon there. Vanessa, do you want to talk a little bit more about other?
I don't know for sure about Seesaw. That's something I can check on though. I know that OER Commons has an integration for Canvas, and I'll show really quickly when you are in a resource, there's a link for Google Classroom, but I will have to check on Seesaw.
Great.
So I'll show this resource or the way to link to Google Classroom. My computer is just loading things very slowly today. But this little Google Classroom icon comes up whenever you're viewing a resource, and that's a way to get it directly into Google Classroom. If you did want to connect with Canvas, it requires an LTI, so that does require your Canvas administrator usually, and you are welcome to contact our team, and I can help send some information to your Canvas administrator about that. Oh, and it looks like Beth Brex says that you can embed a link into Seesaw. Thanks for sharing that.
I see that 2 people found 2 different images of a bridge, one on the math group and one on the STEM Hubs group. So nice work on that one. Is there anyone else who found something really cool that they wanted to share with the rest of the group? You're welcome to unmute if you want to share. Okay. Well, or you can put something in the chat if you found a link to something you want to put a link to it in the chat. That's awesome. That's what the hub is all about. It's about sharing great resources. So we will continue on here with our next learning target, which is I can recognize open licensing.
Okay, thank you. So I know Vanessa was giving from her memory there, she was trying to get us to all know when these things came out, but I have some specifics here on this slide. So in October, it was October of 2015, the US Department of Education co-hosted the first Open Education Summit, where the hashtag #GoOpen movement was launched. This movement challenged school districts and states to transform teaching and learning, in part by replacing traditional and quickly out-of-date instructional materials with openly licensed educational resources. In 2016, Governor Brown announced that Oregon would join the growing list of hashtag #GoOpen states committed to this transition, increasing access to high-quality learning opportunities for all students and educators. Oregon Open Learning is the platform to help Oregon educators and students realize the benefits of open resources and lean into our hashtag #GoOpen commitment. When this hashtag #GoOpen was established, then Secretary of Education John B. King Jr. said the following, and I will read this slide for you, but by requiring an open license, we will ensure that high quality resources created through our public funds are shared with the public, thereby ensuring equal access for all teachers and students, regardless of their location or background. So, with this focus in mind, we do need to learn a little bit more about open licenses. So Vanessa is going to take us into talking about the various licenses.
Thanks, Deb. When we talk about open educational resources, it's important to understand how open licenses are related to copyright. Copyright is the set of protections afforded to the author of intellectual property. Copyright is automatically afforded to works of intellectual property as soon as they're put into a tangible format, such as a document, a video recording, or an audio recording. When you see the copyright symbol, the C with the circle around it, that denotes the all rights reserved copyright license. Open licenses are a form of copyright that specifically give permissions to the users of the content. One example is the CC BY license, which you can see in the bottom right corner of the screen. This license is also called the attribution license. By literally means who is that resource by. So when you use a CC BY license, you can do any of the 5 R's that we talked about earlier, You just have to provide attribution to the original author. There are many free resources available on the internet, but many of them are still under the all rights reserved copyright. The challenge with free resources that are under copyright is that permissions are very limited. A free resource might only be available freely for a short period of time, or it might require a subscription to access all the features or to download it and use it somewhere other than the website. One of the biggest limitations is that free resources do not give educators permission to adapt the content or to share the content with others. On the other hand, open resources are licensed in such a way that they explicitly state what permissions the user has.
All right, so I am going to walk us through this slide here on Creative Commons licenses. And I always joke that this is the area I needed to spend the most time on, just because at first glance it looks a little intimidating, but actually once you get in there and start to understand, it's pretty easy to navigate. So the image here demonstrates the licenses from most open, which is on the top left, the public domain above the dark green, to the least open, which is on the bottom right, which is copyright, which is what Vanessa was talking about. So in the chat, Renee will put a reference to these licenses so you can explore kind of on your own after this webinar. But the public domain in the upper left refers to the creative materials that are not protected by intellectual property law, such as copyright, trademark, or patent law. The public owns these works. As anyone can use the public domain work without obtaining permission, but no one ever owns that particular resource or that piece of work. On the other end of the scale is copyright. And as Vanessa stated earlier, this means all rights reserved. This is typically our published textbooks, and copyright material is not appropriate for us to use on OER Commons or on the Oregon Open Learning Hub. But between those two, between the public domain and the copyright, are 6 of the Creative Commons licenses. And these provide an easy way to manage proper license that can be attached to developed materials and resources. And Creative Commons allows the developed resources to be shared and reused under the terms that are flexible and legally sound. So these 6 Creative Commons licenses are also on a continuum of being most open to least open. So we'll go through these a little bit here. So in the first column on the left above the dark colored green are the 2 most open licenses. These licenses allow resources to be openly shared and remixed and used commercially. This is what the circular icons represent above the dark green: copy, remix, and commercial. The CC BY, and BY just means the author, and CC BY share alike provide the most flexibility for dissemination and use. The only difference between these are the SA, and the share alike is the added expectation that resources are shared with the exact same license agreement. In the middle column above the light green are 2 licenses that allow openly shared and remixed resources, but these cannot be used commercially. The icon in the light green does not include the $sign because NC means non-commercial. And then on the far right-hand column above the yellow are the least open Creative Commons licenses and can only be shared as is, and the materials cannot be changed in any way. So it's important to identify which one of these 6 licenses you are applying to the materials you've created and which one of the 6 licenses have been applied to the materials that you intend to use that may not currently have a Creative Commons license or may not be part of the Oregon Open Learning Group. And just again, remember, copyright material, meaning all rights reserved, is not appropriate for the OER Commons. So some of you already know that you are aware and utilize all kinds of great resources that have been developed by someone else, and you may want to place it into a group on the Oregon Open Learning Hub, but you also want to make sure it's credited appropriately. So before you add any resources to the Oregon Open Learning Hub, we need to identify how the original resource is licensed. So the first step would be to look at the document itself and just quickly scan for Creative Commons licenses. Often there will not be any indication in the bottom of the document or in the middle of the top of the web page. The next step would be always scroll to the bottom of the page. Often this is where you would determine if there was a Creative Commons license or if it's copyrighted material on the bottom of the page. And if it's still not clear, sometimes you click into the terms of use or user agreements, and there's typically information in there on how the resource may be used or shared. So some of you may be familiar with the Open SciEd materials, and so you can click into that and it gives you the information on how to use it in an educational setting. Sometimes, though, it's still not completely clear. So we often use the Contact Us link and reach out to the provider directly. This actually serves as dual purposes. One, you can get confirmation on whether or not it can be added to the Oregon Open Learning Hub. And two, it provides an awareness to the author that we're seeking openly licensed materials. We continuously we're trying to change the culture of open sharing and leveraging great resources. And sometimes the authors of these resources aren't aware of Creative Commons licensing. So now Deb and Noelle are going to walk us through some of our final learning outcomes on how to actually utilize the authoring tools within the hub.
Thanks, Jamie. So I'm going to walk you through adding a resource to the Oregon Open Learning. There are 3 primary ways to add resources into OOL. We'll name them here. Then we'll go into a bit more detail in the next few slides. The first way to add a resource into Oregon Open Learning is by saving an existing OER Common resource to an Oregon Open Learning group. The second way is to use Open Author. And then the third way would be to submit an OER from the web. So, one of the easiest ways to add a resource is to locate an OER somewhere already on OER Commons site and save it to a group on the Oregon Open Learning Hub. For example, you may have searched through another state's hub and have found a resource that you believe would be great to share on the Oregon Open Learning Hub. The image on this screen shows a resource from the Washington OER Hub. We want to save it to the Oregon Science Group in Oregon Open Learning. You will need an OER account and need to join the group you wish to save the resource to. When you find this resource, simply click the Save button and select the group in which you want to save it. Please verify that the particular OER doesn't already exist in that group. Search for the title or browse the subfolders before saving the resource. Once you've saved the resource and it is approved by the group administrators, and those currently are Vanessa and Jamie, it will be visible to everyone who is accessing the group in Oregon Open Learning, including the description, standards alignment, and other metadata. Curating resources in this way is easy, but you likely will want to create your own resources on the hub too. And so I think Noelle is going to show us how to do that.
There are considerations you should take before deciding which approach is best for adding content to the Oregon Open Learning Hub. For example, saving a resource which Vanessa just showed you. Did we show that? Would be most efficient for bringing an existing OER Commons resource into Oregon's hub. An open author would be best suited for remixing and customizing resources. Users are able to import directly from Google Drive, take advantage of the check accessibility feature, as well as include instructor notes that are not student-facing while creating content that is. You can create resources for a specific group or task, making the curation of resources convenient and easy. There's a way to tag your resource with metadata that will allow it to be easily searchable by others. Metadata tags consist of things like grade level, subject, content area, and state standards alignment, to name just a few. You can also submit from the web. This would be a good way to include a resource that is contained to a particular page or set of pages that are easily navigable for the user. Or another example would be the Oregon Open Learning User Guide, which is a living Google document. As we learn new things about how the hub works, or as we get feedback from user guide users, we want to be able to modify the content on the user guide. By submitting this resource from the web, it allows us to make changes on the Google Doc, which are then updated in real time. Those changes are reflected both on the original document as well as on the resource that was submitted from the web to the Oregon Open Learning Hub. . And Susan will take us through another Mentimeter activity.
Actually, just looking at the time, I think we will just have her go to the next steps and support, just because we want to honor folks' time. Thank you.
Yeah, so just wanted to kind of wrap up here by saying that if you are new to OER and open education, as most of us on this team were just a few months ago, we certainly understand that this can feel a bit overwhelming at first. So one more plug for that user guide. There's a lot of short videos in there that you can watch, and we have actually, it's kind of separated into two modules. One that's really about OER, and the second module is more specific to the Oregon Open Learning Hub. The module might sound a little intimidating. It really only takes 30 to 45 minutes at the most if you looked at every single resource in the module, and it's not a lockstep thing. So you can also pick and choose in terms of your own learning needs. So keep that in mind. We encourage you to search for resources on the hub and then curate them or save them to a group. And that science group hopefully will be getting lots of additions. And then as you're thinking, you know, it's really great to interact with all of you this afternoon and see your excitement. And so as you're, you know, thinking about sharing this with other folks at your school or other people, other educators that you know, we just want you to know that we're here to partner with you and are happy to consult. Jamie shared the link to the slides, so you're welcome to use that slide deck, customize it. I also noticed that I think Leah put in the chat something about, you know, talking to curriculum and instruction departments. And so if your district is interested in a partnership, we are certainly open to that. So we hope that you will reach out to us. And I'll pass it back to Jamie to close us out.
Yeah, absolutely. Share the slide deck or reach out and we can do another presentation if that works. I know there were some questions in there that we probably didn't get to about, oh, where did it go? Now I can't even find it. It's been an active chat group, which is great. So yes, please share the slides out. We're happy to address anything. If you have some specific questions that you think maybe pertain to me and maybe not the Oregon Open Learning Hub, feel free. On the slide right now, there's our email address. So we're happy to follow up in any way. And I know Leah has some closing remarks, so I also want to honor that. So you get PDUs for your time today. So again, thank you so much. I know some of you are venturing into some unknown territory. So just let us know how we can best show up for you and alongside you. So thank you for being so fantastic. I hope you have a fantastic year.
Thanks, team, for all this great information. I think it's kind of reassuring to know that as we're trying to build a whole new curriculum this year, that there's the opportunity to collaborate and share. So I'm really excited about that. I'm going to share my screen really quickly just because I want to share some important links with everyone. So I put this in the chat already, but here on the left is our evaluation form. So please do fill that out so you can get your PDU for attending tonight. And I also just want to let people know we have another webcast coming up in 2 weeks with an awesome expert, Tim Welch. He's a Google Classroom, Google everything expert. He is going to sort of tailor a presentation for us that really focuses on science and how to use different tools in Google Suite for remote learning. So I think it's going to be really relevant, and we're going to try to gear it towards K-12 audience. I'm a kindergarten teacher, so I can try to fill in a little bit with Tim on some of the lower primary grade stuff. So I encourage you to check that out. And then also our fall conference is happening, but it's going to be all online, and we are partnering with Washington State Science Teachers Association to do a 2-day conference for the price of $35 for non-members, and it includes a year membership. If you're already a membership, it's only $10 to attend for 2 days. So it's a really great value, and we have some really amazing presenters, including Dr. Oki Lee from New York University, Dr. Brian Brown from Stanford, who's someone I'm super excited to hear from, and Dr. Philip Bell from the University of Washington. So definitely something that I hope you can spread the word about and encourage colleagues to sign up for. I think that's all of the announcements I have. So the recording will be posted on our website for members. So again, I would encourage you, if you're thinking about going to the conference, to register now, become a member, and all of your webcasts will be free for the year. You'll get to access all the videos all year. You'll get to access videos from the conference on the website. So really, I think this is the best year to join OSTA. So if anyone has any questions about that, I'll hang out for a few minutes in the chat. But otherwise, I know people probably have busy evenings to get to. So thank you all for being here. Thanks to our presenters, and excited to kick off a year of learning together in a whole new world.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Oh, good to know some people can't use bit.ly links. I will in the future paste a bit. I will use the bit.ly on the slide, but I can also paste that link in the chat. So thank you to Maestro Rosales for doing that for us. The conference is October 10th and 11th, and it's going to be all day, both days. But the beautiful thing about a virtual conference is you can pop in and out for whichever sessions you want. You don't have to commit to being there all day. I know a lot of folks might have required in-service going on Friday, but you can also then go watch some of those videos after the fact if you weren't able to attend live. We're not going to record every single session because that would just take up a ton of bandwidth, but we will try to pick some key ones, especially from our, special guest presenters to record. Oh, did I put the wrong dates? I hope not. It's Friday and Saturday, so sorry if I put the wrong dates. That might have been last year's dates. Oh no. It looks like Jennifer might be having a hard time getting into OER. Is that?
Not sure what email. So if you register, and I don't know how they do their batching, if they do it every couple of hours or if they do it instantaneous. So if you're still having problems and don't receive an email tomorrow, feel free to reach out to me. I don't know, Vanessa, if you have some other suggestions.
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen again here for a second. So I have noticed that some people are having an issue with getting that confirmation email. So when you're on the site, if you are having that problem, the accounts are managed through OER Commons. But if you use this little help widget, that pops up a help center, and it has a contact us button. And so just use that contact us button and let them know that you haven't gotten that, and they'll be able to help you finish that account setup.
I knew you would have a solution for us, so thank you.
Let's see. I saw a question in the chat. I think Susan's still here about how to view the recording. If you'll have to log into our website as a member, and then it's in the members only section. There's a page for our webcast archives. And I can actually find the link and give you the direct link in just a moment. Here we go. So this will only work if you're a member and you're logged into the website with your correct login. We also have archives from the last 2 years, and there's some really, I have to say, some pretty great stuff in there. So please do check it out. Any other questions from folks for our awesome ODE team, or any other OSTA questions? All right, well,